Thank you all very much. Thank you for coming up for this launch. This is the launch of the GSMA Intelligence 2024 Global Trends Report. And first, I know it's day 3, it's the morning, this is Hall 8. It's not easy to get out here, so thank you all very, very much for showing up. Seeing this many people, not just here, but here for really what is an exploration of our insights. And I think for those of you who don't know who GSMA Intelligence is, we're the research and consulting arm of the GSMA. We focus on insights, and so seeing this many people who are interested in really learning about the industry, it's what we all come to MWC for, but really, really appreciate it. Thank you all very much. Hope to make it worth your time. That's right, that way. There we go. So for those of you who don't know who GSMA Intelligence is, I won't make this very long. Again, we're the research and consulting arm of the GSMA. There's a lot of stuff up there explaining what we do. The short story is, I have the privilege of running a team of analysts who are engaged, excited about the market, want to help customers understand what's going on, right? We get great access to operators, great access to events like this, leveraging that access to help understand the market and deliver insights. And it's as easy as that. And that's what we're here for. If you're a customer, thank you. If not, would love to chat, and hopefully you find some of these insights very interesting. So let's move on. I think this is, as it says on the title, launch of our Global Trends Report. Now what we've been doing, we've been launching this report for a number of years. And it is a report where we take stock of what we think will matter going forward. You might think that maybe we should wait till after MWC is done to see if that changes our minds. We think we have a pretty good idea of what's going on, and we want to provide some guidance for what will be shaping the industry as we talk to our customers, as we talk to operators, as we talk to the market. And you see the big topics, and I'm going to go through these one by one very quickly before we go into a panel with really some of the smartest people in the industry, some of the people that are helping to drive these trends. So let's dig into these, and remember these, because if you have questions later on, we can dig into any of them individually. But before I do that, we do this report in partnership with a number of companies, a number of companies that we think are particularly important. You'll see AWS. I think hopefully you all know who AWS is, and we have Robin here from AWS to help talk about what they're doing. Vodafone. Hopefully you all know who Vodafone is. Anyone not? If you're embarrassed to raise your hand and ask me later, I can tell you who Vodafone is. You should go see their booth. Keegan. I think a lot of folks know of Keegan, particularly from their past relationship with ARM, the great work they're doing. ESA. Who knows who ESA is? There we go. ESA, European Space Agency. So they've been great, obviously, with all the work that's going on around the satellite. If you haven't been down to the GSMA booth, I believe there's a spacesuit down there. Is a spacesuit in the GSMA booth? I mean, you could have a car in your booth, but a car is not cool. Cars are done. Spacesuits are cool. So thanks to ESA for their support on this. So if I dig into sort of when we looked at those trends, I'm going to go through those fairly quickly. How do we see these all fitting together, right? Well, I think we know, and you'll see this across the show, 5G is making continued progress, right? We know there's adoption. That's taking off fastest technology in terms of mobile broadband adoption, monetization questions, right? We all see that. You see that on the show floor. We see where FWA fits in. We understand 5G continues to be the focus. But it's not just about 5G. It's how do we advance 5G with new technologies? Again, you see that on the show floor, right? What we're doing with cloud, what we're doing with edge, how Gen AI fits in. It's why we're here, right? How eSIM can drive it or not. And then finally, though, it's not just about technology, it's about business, right? It's about the business of how you take 5G and these new technologies and actually make money with it. And we didn't plan all of this before MWC, but I think these are the exact same themes that you'll see somewhere here like MWC, and we hope to see them reflected in our report. So let's just start with 5G's next wave. I hit this before, all right? A couple of years ago, it was very much in the media. Everyone was saying 5G is the fastest growing mobile broadband technology, and it was just sort of thrown out there like one of those facts. And I said, have we actually put together the numbers? So we pulled together the numbers. Across the team, we have data from every operator group, every operator in the world, every country, and so we can look at that progress, and we see it continuing to go this way. right? It is startling when you look at where 5G is compared to 4G, 2G, and 3G, right? The idea that by the middle of this year, we'll have more 5G connections than 2G and 3G combined, right? We know it has taken off, but we also know that the original hope, 5G driving growth, is still a work in progress. And that's where we are. And it's an important sort of way to start off the conversation about what we think is going to drive the conversation in mobile in the industry in 2024. Of course, and you might say, if we haven't quite done what we need to do with 5G, should we be talking about what's next? And the answer is, well, yes, we have to. Right? We have to continue talking about what's next because technologies evolve. And as much as we might talk about, and some people say, well, 5G hasn't really been successful. Without 5G, we would not have been able to meet the basic needs of consumers, right? We haven't completely pushed into the enterprise like we want, but for consumers, enhanced mobile broadband, meeting all those video needs, meeting all the communication needs, we wouldn't be able to do that with 5G, and we won't be able to meet new needs without things like 5G Advanced. So this is going to be a big topic across, and for those of you who don't know, 5G Advanced is the next release of 3GPP standards. It really is the bridge between 5G and 6G, right? How are we going to get to 6G? How are we going to take some of those 6G technologies and put them into 5G? And when we talk to operators, we see that's what the vast majority think 5G Advanced will be about. This does bring up that perennial question, though. Is this a solution for a problem, or is it a solution looking for a problem? And so what we need to understand is, what is this technology going to do? How is it going to be put to use? And when we talk to operators, and we go out and we run some great benchmarks and survey works with them, we actually see a fairly good service focus. So it's not just about technology for the sake of technology. It's technology linked to services. What do we want? They want improved uplink. Why? To support things like metaverse, AR, VR. They want network slicing to push into those B2B markets. Security, edge compute, same thing for the B2B markets. They understand it's a technology, but they see the use case, and they have that monetization focus. And I think we'll see that over the rest of the year. FWA. As much as we can talk about, and you hear a lot of times people saying, maybe 5G hasn't been successful and we haven't found the breakout use case. FWA has been one of those breakout use cases, fixed wireless, right? And it seems kind of boring. I was talking about fixed wireless access when I first started in the industry. I won't say how many decades ago, but a number of decades ago, right? And we get the value proposition. Bringing broadband to people that's too difficult to connect with fixed line connections. Great. But also, how do we use this to compete? Giving mobile operators a chance to compete in new markets and compete for new customer segments. That's what 5G is supposed to be about. We're seeing that with FWA. But as much as it's matured, it doesn't mean it's completely mature, and we're going to see it evolve. Right? So how do we see that evolution in terms of mobile competing with other mobile operators or fixed operators? Right? How do we see it being built into bundles, some sort of converged offer? And then again, how do we see 5G Advanced play out? Those are the kind of things we're going to need to see across the year. That's why we think it's going to be a particularly important topic. For those of you who thought you could get through a session without some mention of AI and generative AI, I hate to disappoint you. Yeah, I'm sorry, but it has to be said, right? Because we understand this will continue to be one of the huge topics. Now, I will take a step back. Generative AI in particular will be one of the most important topics of the year. AI more broadly. And I think it is worth noting that beyond generative AI, there's a lot of important stuff going on with AI that's really important in the telco space. Generative AI is getting a lot of the attention. Why is it getting a lot of the attention? Because it's really democratized what we can do with AI. It's put it into the hands of regular people and shown them some cool new things that you can do. I think, unfortunately, and one of the things that we'll need to see in the telco space is that a lot of it's focused on sort of this function of how do I save money or become more efficient versus new services and actually generating revenues. So when we go out and we ask operators, hey, what's going to be the impact? How are you going to actually use this? We see that, right? We see a focus on things like troubleshooting, threat detection, right? Obviously, you've probably all heard some of the use cases of improving your call center, your contact center, having those folks troubleshoot and deal with customers, and that's great. The network stuff, the early momentum there, it's great to see that use because we all need to be using these tools to understand how they work to get them proliferate. But there is this growth imperative. We know operators, you can't save yourself to growth. That's an axiom for a reason. And so what we want to see over the course of the years is not just this network side, not just the saving money, but how can new Gen AI tools be put to use for actually generating revenues, creating new services, driving revenues as opposed to driving savings. I think that's going to be a focus. You're already seeing that on the show floor, some great ideas. We'll see it across the rest of the year. I was asked earlier today when I was talking with some of our media team about, what is the one thing we're probably not hearing a lot about this year at MWC, the one thing that seems to not be top of mind. And I actually said cloud. And I said, and I think that's a good thing, right? Because in the years past, we heard a lot about, here's why you should move to cloud, and here's how you can move to cloud. I think in 2024, we get that it's just foundational. It's not a question of if, it's a question of not even how. I think we know it. It's just, what are you going to do next on cloud? What we haven't heard, though, which I also think is interesting, is we get it, right? We understand how pivotal this is. We understand how cloud and edge aren't really separate. They're all part of a continuum, distributed cloud, and what you can do and some cool new stuff you can do. What's interesting is, when we look at it, there's also some implications. So we worked with operators to try and understand, where are you going to be processing your traffic, right? Is it on device, particularly on IoT, on-prem edge, far edge, near edge, somewhere in the core cloud? You can see some of the results here and where they see going forward. And that's interesting for where they place their workloads as they look at things like generative AI, where they need to invest. But as we'll see later, that's going to be changing. And there also are implications for things like not just how we do business, but things like sustainability. We're beginning to figure this out, particularly because cloud has become just sort of foundational and understood. These are the next implications we'll see, of course, the rest of the year. Future of entertainment, right? We can talk about B2B being one of the new growth opportunities for operators. And I think we know that it's out there. But we can't ignore things like entertainment, right? Gaming, video, right? We know it's what people want to consume. And on the one hand, we know it's taking up a lot of network traffic, and maybe that's difficult. We have to keep up with it. But it's also something that can be monetized, right? Strategies are different. Some operators are going to push video, some will push partnering, some will push gaming, but it's not something any operator can ignore. They just need to figure out how it fits into their plans. Because when you look at it, when you look at 5G versus 4G, and you see what people want to do, the difference, you see streaming, you see music, you see sports, you see gaming. These are the things that people want to do, and they think they can do better with 5G. And the opportunity is there for operators to figure out how to monetize that. Private wireless. Private wireless seems like something that we've been talking about for years. I remember when 5G was first coming out, there was a conversation, and there were a number of statements being said, look, we're talking about CapEx and operators. But the reality is it's the enterprise that's going to be driving a lot of the investments, and they'll probably be spending more than operators. And maybe they will someday, but they're not yet. Right? Private wireless remains a technology where there's great use cases. We see a number of good examples. There's a lot of operators on the show floor who are showing off what they can do, undeniable value for enterprises with specific requirements. But it clearly hasn't taken off as quick as I think a lot of folks thought. But the reason why we're bullish, beyond the fact that it's just an important space for 2024, is that we're seeing demand, right? When we look at those customers out there, we're beginning to see these demand signals. The market's telling us, maybe it's beginning to mature. This will be the year, particularly around 5G Advanced coming online, particularly around all the solutions that are out there, especially now that cloud is foundational, especially as we see this being more and more integrated, the solutions are mature. It's why we're bullish on 2024 in private wireless. Talking about private wireless as a technology that we've been mentioning for years, and maybe it's been a bit slow. I think if there's one technology that probably surpasses, there's been a lot of interest in it, and maybe it's gone slow, it's eSIM. Who here, show of hands, who has a phone with an eSIM? No, keep your hands up. Lower your hands if it's an iPhone. Yeah, okay. So outside of the iPhone, and I think we were all hopeful, right? The iPhone was going to drive everyone to do eSIM when they went eSIM only. But we know the device ecosystem is still not where it needs to be. And the uptake still isn't where it needs to be. And we're not really sure 2024 is going to be the year where that changes, But we see things changing going out 25 and 26. You see different markets, right? We know there's some stuff changing in markets like China. And more importantly, we see this year setting the stage for that. We know it's critical. We know it's critical of things like private wireless to giving consumers choice. It's something that we need to see happen, and we expect to see this year set the stage. Oh, wrong direction. Satellite NTN. I talked about ESA being one of the sponsors of our report, and it's not surprising why. If you look at the market, I mean, other than AI, probably satellite's probably the one topic you can't get away from on the show floor, right? And it makes sense. The number of different companies who are pushing into the market, who are saying this time will be different, because if you've been in the industry enough, you've seen the coming and going of different satellite focuses. I think this year, though, you're seeing so many different companies with so many different constellations. LEO constellations bringing new things, new companies that you're hearing of from just every day, right? New companies saying, hey, we're going to build a new ground station setup. I don't know if anyone's seen that, or companies talking about millimeter wave for LEO. If you had suggested millimeter wave satellite access 5 years ago, people would be like, I need what they're smoking, because that just seemed crazy, right? But the technology is making this possible. Right? I was talking with a company that does OSS and BSS, and they say, look, we need to engineer SLAs because they have enterprise customers. But how do you do an SLA when it's LEO and you're switching from one satellite to the next, and maybe it's at one part of the equipment? But we have the technology to do it now. And that's why it's really an important time. And we're seeing these companies out there. For those of you who are interested in this space, we are having a satellite summit in the afternoon. It's back closer to the rest of the show. Encourage you, just check that out. But this is such a vibrant space. And for those of you who were here before, sustainability. We just launched our telco energy benchmark just earlier today. Sustainability, such an important part of the industry. And it's one of those things that almost like cloud is sort of foundational. It's ambient. But why we think this is such an important year for it is in part because it doesn't go away as being important, but in part because we're seeing the conversation change, right? We just launched our telco energy benchmark. That's all about energy consumption, and that's important, but the conversation is changing to be about sustainability more broadly, not just energy consumption, circularity. How do we think not just about scope 1, but scope 2 and scope 3? How do we change the impact? And also, how do we sit there and recognize as an industry, because we don't do a great job as an industry recognizing this, talking about the impacts we're having on other industries. When you use mobile broadband and you digitize another industry, transport, utilities, healthcare, how much do you improve them? How do you improve their sustainability focus? And it's a message that we need to get out there because there is a net value there. So with that, I just want to say thank you. Hopefully what you came here for was the conversation, because this is going to be a great panel. And let's just dig into that. So thank you. Please stick around. Let me move over here. Thank you, guys. So you know what I'm going to do is I could introduce, if you've ever moderated a session, I think one of the most difficult things, you have everyone's bios. And some bios just sort of say, Bob is VP here. And some say Bob is VP here and has 2 children and likes mountain biking, and here was his favorite high school teacher. And you never know like how. So I'm gonna let everyone. I'm gonna go one by one and just a bit about who you are, what you're doing, and Robin, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Thanks. Can you hear me? Okay. Awesome. Thanks for having me. Robin Harwani. I lead the technology teams within our worldwide go-to-market organization for telecom at Amazon Web Services. Nice to be here.
Wonderful.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Harrison Lung. I am the Group Chief Strategy Officer of EN. We are the telco transitioning to be a techco. 15 billion revenue, USD, 50 billion in market cap, assets in both the telco and tech space. On the telco side, we operate in 16 markets, approximately 170 million subscribers. On the tech side, we have assets like Kareem, which is a JV with Uber. We have assets like Stars Play, which is JVs with Lionsgate. And nice to meet you all.
Hi, I'm Ivan. I'm Chief Business Officer of Infobip. I lead strategy, marketing, sales, and partnerships globally. And yeah, Infobip is by footprint largest global cloud communications player. We have services in 190 countries and physically present in around 80. And last year we touched 2/3 of all mobile subscribers in the world with our services.
Honey.
Oh, thank you.
No worries.
Three-letter acronyms in the title. I won't bore you with that. How many of you here are from the telecoms industry, either service providers? So not so many. So my title and my company is of completely no relevance to any of you here. So to give you a brief introduction, I work in a company that does mobile networks. And my role is fundamentally to work with folks like these and really clever people here and try and demystify telecoms for the rest of you. The reason why Peter's invited me here is I have very strong opinions. That is what I'll contribute today. All right? Thank you.
And that's you know, I think hopefully what we'll have is a good conversation. I told everyone ahead of time, it's going to be a great conversation because I set up some great questions, which are on my pad over my bag over there. So I'm going to hope I remember them. And if I get them wrong, you're all smart enough with opinions enough to freestyle here. But I'm going to start with an easy one, right? So I called out our 10 key themes, what we think will be important this year. I mean, if you were to think about the one that's most important either to you and your business or you think will be most important, which one? And we'll just go, we'll try and have a conversation later on, but we'll go one by one. Robin, what do you think is the most of those? What are you looking at?
I think for us, we really had all the conversations with our customers, and what stood out this year was generative AI. It really had a resonance in terms of what the customers are trying to achieve, working backwards from all the things that you mentioned in terms of monetizing the network, monetizing both fixed and mobile networks, looking at transforming industries, looking at virtualization of networks and maintenance, preventative maintenance use cases. So there was a huge emphasis on that from our customers. We're trying to look at how do we generate more revenue and look at how they can take cost out of the business. This has been, Amazon has been using artificial intelligence for 20 plus years in our business across the lines of businesses. But I think generative AI has a profound capability and impact potential that I think collectively we can harness together.
So that doesn't mean the rest of you can't say Gen AI, but are you seeing the same thing? I mean, obviously.
I guess I have to now because
of course.
No, but joking aside, I think first of all that's an excellent list, and I think all of them are important. Whether it's Gen AI, whether it's eSIM, whether it's satellite, etc. But that being said, I do agree with Rob that Gen AI is important. But I'll sort of look at it from a slightly different view. Because I think Rob had mentioned a lot of excellence points on sort of the use cases and how to apply it and the network optimization part of it. But to me, there's sort of two broader implications. The first is if you look at the large language models that's out there today, it's good. Is that good enough? And how do you further fine-tune it and customize it? So that's why, at least on this front, 2 days ago, and I know we're on day 3, EN, along with Deutsche Telekom, along with SoftBank, ST Telecom, Singtel, in their respective markets, announced the Telco AI Alliance. And the next step in further utilizing our telco data to build a telco-specific LLM model. Because the last thing we want, whether it's in next product to buy offers, whether it's in your news, is to have inaccurate data and hallucination. So by using real life data, we can really fine tune it from 80% good to hopefully 90, 95, 99% good, right? So I think that's number one. The second thing is if you look at the broader, again, LLM, there's a lot of compute that is needed. In fact, we had the World Government Summit in Dubai 2 weeks ago, and Jensen Huang from NVIDIA was actually on stage talking to the Minister of AI in the UAE. And his thing was really about, how do you, give access from a democratization perspective of these really expensive chips, A100, H100s, and all that stuff. And how is that going to transition potentially from a hardware to cloud GPU angle, right? And how are you going to have all that compute power that is needed to process all the LLMs and all the data? So I think all those are excellent points, but I would actually sort of frame it in these two additional angles that's very important as we sort of push this technology forward.
No, that's fair. Ivan, I know you guys announced some Gen AI integrated into the Infobip platform for some solutions. You can feel free to say something else was important.
Yeah, I will say something else because if I say Gen AI, it's boring. Yes, we did integrate. Actually, we did some live cases where Chief Commercial Officer of Microsoft has featured this. But It was in partnership with them. But actually, I think one thing is maybe missing, and I think it on the top line looks irrelevant for telco, but it's very relevant. And I would say a rich channel evolution in the Western world, because you might have Gen AI, but actually you need to expose it somewhere to consumers. And I'll take a few minutes to explain. Now, why you don't notice is because when you look at the top line of telcos, it looks like a small number, but actually if you go to EBITDA, it's a pretty big number. Because essentially telcos are just milking infrastructure, they have no extra costs, and we are selling this for them. So it's actually quite a significant thing. But it's much more significant in terms of customer experience, because we were yesterday on a panel, they spoke about next-gen marketing mediated by Gen AI. But guess what? That marketing is still sending you a message which forces you to give yes or no answer. I take this offer, I don't. Now imagine if you send that through rich messaging, and some cultures have culture of bargaining. I'm just giving an example. And you can chat there live, and you literally sort of could say, hey, I would buy this, but at this price. This is a game changer. This boosts marketing conversion 4 or 5-fold. So having said that, I will give 3 examples, then I stop. So for example, in Southeast Asia and around, we're working with the crop company, and we are launching like literally Gen AI experiences for farmers in rich messaging, so they can get advices on the spot, on the weather, how to use the fertilizers, videos, and so forth. In India, with biggest hospital chain, we have a whole experience for patients where you enter messaging, and there is a symptom checker, and if we think it's serious, we're sending it straight to the chat with healthcare professional, and we can launch a video call. If it's not so serious, we send them to a booking flow, and if it's not relevant, we'll tell them just go to pharmacy and so forth. And to go to Western world, actually, it's much slower in adoption. But actually in US, for example, Walmart has text to shop. So my wife always sends me on the weekend to buy stuff, and I tell her, send me a message what I need to buy. Now Walmart has done this, that in your iMessage, you can just in my phone. I'm not using like 10 of them, but messaging, I guess you're using messaging now and few other people. You're using all the time. So I think that's another trend that's relevant for telco, but in particular for transformation of customer experience. That's like we should kind of watch out, because that's kind of going to change a lot of things.
Definitely fair. Ani, we're going to come back to the things that we're missing, because I think there was one specific thing we can talk with a bit. But what of that list, what do you think is most important to you?
To us, I think, well, I mean, it's definitely generative AI at the moment, plus potentially network APIs. I don't know if they were on the list.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
Ani, what about you?
There were about 10, 11, right?
Yeah.
So I just have a couple of comments to make, and then I'll take a slightly different approach to interpreting those trends. First, Rockstar Dude, day 3, full house. Impressive. You can really get people in. So thank you all for being here. Now, between what Harrison, Ivan, and Robin have said, I'm not going to be able to add much intelligence to their interpretation of the specific trends. But I'll give you my perspective of the trends that you had, which is my way of reading the tea leaves or the larger macro patterns that you can use these underlying trends to interpret. My first statement would be that sometimes the best business is the most boring out of these trends. So for the last 5 years, 5G has been all about flying drones and, I don't know, whatever, flying carpets and low latency and automated cars and what have you. And what do we find today? Fixed wireless access, the most boring of use cases, which is basically an airborne fiber, is the biggest use case in 5G. So I think my interpretation of one of these business trends is sometimes as an industry, we tend to overhype cool shit, where the reality is the most boring shit is what actually sells. So fixed wireless access is making money for operators. Sustainability was cool because green is cool, blah, 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 but the reality is green makes good business sense. Energy efficient networks are good, people save money. So boring is actually beautiful. That's my first interpretation. The second statement would be what sounds cool today will be basic capabilities next year. So we've spoken a lot about incredible capabilities of 5G, like low latency, URLLC. Nobody talks about them anymore. So my other interpretation is things like Gen AI, Some of the other capabilities that we are talking about in terms of automation, applying artificial intelligence and machine learning, which sounds sexy today, will just be the cost of doing business from next year. They are not cool things. It's just cool today. The last thing, and this is going to be a bit controversial, is I believe it's only even-numbered Gs that have been successful. Odd-numbered Gs have always sucked. Why? 2G was very successful because it did something fundamentally different. It really made voice work for people in your hands. 3G was a complete failure because it was just an incremental improvement over 2G. It did data very poorly. 4G did very well, even number G, because it really transformed data. 5G has also been a bit of a lame duck, because for all the talk around 5G, it has still been more of an incremental improvement over 4G. I believe that one trend that you came up with, non-terrestrial networks, again, this is just my prediction, it's an odd number G, and it is going to be a fundamental change to the way mobile networks operate because it's no longer about terrestrial networks. Now we are talking about the confluence of satellites and terrestrial networks, and that pushes the boundaries of mobile networks into space. These are just my interpretation of your trends.
No,
I'm not going to question any one of them. They're all relevant. This is just my reading of the
No,
trends.
you're I think 100% right in terms of how they come together, and I think it is how they come together that's the important part. Now, and I appreciate you sort of say we've got a bunch of good things there, but I got to recognize there's probably some things that we don't have there that maybe are important and to go into, and I'd say a couple, right? And it'd be good to get everyone's thoughts on those, like topics, and we've gotten questions about these specific things we don't call out. Ivan, you mentioned out APIs, right? We didn't mention opening APIs. It's a good point of discussion. Open RAN, right? Open RAN. I mean, if I think about some of the big topics on the floor, Open RAN's there. It's something that clearly AWS is working with. You're working with, Ani. And then, I think those are probably good places to start. But then, in going back a bit to what you were saying, RCS, right? We didn't say RCS. I mean, I think if I looked at the end of last year, right, we went to the tail end of last year, I'd say this is the last quarter of 2023, and we've got Ericsson who is committing to support AT&T with Open RAN. We have Apple who has said, yeah, sure, we'll support RCS. Now, it probably wasn't quite as, yeah, sure. It was obviously there were pressures there. Those were huge changes, right? Things that maybe some people thought they would never see. So when you think about the gaps of what we didn't cover, are those important things? I mean, maybe Open RAN, Ani, although you guys RCS as well?
I don't think so. I'm going to be a bit controversial here. Open RAN, again, 2 years back, hot topic, you were considered to be a disruptor because we were taking on my former employer, which was Ericsson, did its own way, blah, blah, blah. Now Ericsson and Nokia have both said they are on to the Open RAN bandwagons. It's yesterday's news. It's just RAN now, right? I think one area which, and you and your team used to do a fantastic job some years back, and that conversation seems to have stopped, is at an industry level, our customers are service providers, which are then servicing you as consumers. For them, service revenues are not growing. They're fairly flat. So all the improvements that we see on the technology side is predominantly a question and matter of cost. If you are able to lower the cost per bit that is delivered through these networks, it makes more sense for them to get more data out to service you, all the flying drones and what have you. You folks used to have a very nice trend line which talked about how in the industry over the previous generation or the previous year, how has the trend line of cost per bit evolved? And now if you were to add, for instance, spectral efficiency and energy efficiency, now it's going to be a complicated, nerdy mathematical equation, but $1 per megahertz per kilowatt hour per bit kind of metric. That is what it's kind of boring. It's not as sexy as using Microsoft Copilot to draw cat videos and shit, but it is meaningful. You know what I mean?
No, I understand. But Robin, you guys, I've seen a lot of Open RAN in your booth. So clearly the folks you're talking to or working with, like, are excited about it or want to figure out how to make it work, or?
No, I do see a lot of interest. Meaning, I think if we look at, I do agree with Annie that things are moving and it has become a conversation of when should we do it rather than should we do it, right? I agree with that topic, but I do see a lot of momentum in that space as well. I think there is going to be set of customers. I hope you saw the announcement with NTT Docomo that we had a few days ago on rollout of Open RAN. And meaning there is operators that have been in the greenfield space that have been on that journey for a while in US, like Dish. AT&T announcement has been very, very, very useful. I think the work that is going on as a collective unit across the ecosystem, it's not just a matter of one player coming together. It's all the way from your infrastructure layer, your hypervisor layer, your L1 acceleration, your real-time operating systems, your the baseband CUDU providers, the RU layers. All of these are decisions, and they are important decisions. How do you go about making those decisions for your network based on your traffic profiles? That cost per bit is an outcome, but I think one of the important things to remember is the inputs that go into that process. And at Amazon, we look at that very closely, right? What drives the output is a very close focus on the inputs, on the mechanisms. And that's one area we believe that it's going to be important. Like the innovations that we have with Graviton, we see that is going to be critical to realize the goal of sustainable networks, right? I think that was mentioned here, but the sustainable networks is the output, where we need to look at the inputs is how do we get there with the innovation that we have.
No, that's a really good way to think of it. So again, in the network side of things, you go into the Amazon space, there's a whole bunch of Open RAN. In sort of the business side, there's a bit about the marketplace and what you guys are doing on the API side front. Maybe just, Ivan, if we talk about some of those things I said we're missing, right? What's more important to you? What do you think's bigger this year? RCS maybe moving forward thanks to Apple, or open APIs thanks to the Open Gateway work? If you had to choose one, if only one of those could exist, what do you think's more important?
Okay, I'll say it now, and then I want to have one overarching comment. So definitely RCS, because to move on open APIs and coordinate among many players, it's going to take time. There'll be point use cases in countries like we launched mobile identity, so you don't need a 2FA in Brazil, but like scaling that globally takes time. RCS will go faster. You also have Google and infrastructure. One overarching thing that I recommend, and I think you did a great job. I mean, we spoke about some things missing. I think actually what's very exciting in the world that we are living is the combinatorial effect of the trends. So each single trend is relevant, but like take something like, let's say in the future, quantum computing. If you had to convince everyone to move to another compute infrastructure, that would take, I don't know, 5 years to adopt, 10 years, whatever. The fact that you can just exchange it on the back end of the cloud and add another CPU that people can access like this, it'll speed up adoption for maybe a decade even. So I think this combinatorial effect, people need to think like, how do they play together? Because that's what's going to drive the adoption. The fact that you have, I don't know, rich messaging on your phone coming natively, you have a mobile device, you have a cloud, and now you have Gen AI, all of a sudden we can start making applications immediately. We don't need to kind of get consumers to use it and whatever. So I think that's the other important thing that should be in discussion and in the panels, what works together. No, it's great.
And it's a great point. I mean, you hit the thing that, is it DT here who launched or who announced their app-free phone? It's the phone that's just essentially leveraging AI. I mean, that plays off what we saw at CES with, I mean, although I think a lot of folks felt the big see-through TVs were the big thing at CES, the little rabbit device that was basically using AI. I mean, you're 100% right of what that does. Harrison, how are you guys saying this?
I was going to add a couple of points on the Open API. And you did the research, so probably from a prioritization level, I don't know where it landed. But to me, with Open API, it's not really, does anyone think that it's important? I think the what is clear. Everyone sees the use cases. Everyone sees the potential and opportunity. It's more on the how. And you sort of alluded to it, and I'll add a little bit more color. So I flew in Friday. And Peter, myself, and many colleagues were in GSMA strategy committee meetings, board meetings over the weekend. Best time, right? And we had a wonderful presentation from Alex, the CTO.
In other words, he's trying to say a lot of people are talking about this as day 3. It's day 5 or 6 for some of us.
And this is on the back of board meetings and capital markets day last week, but I digress. But on the Open API point, I think Alex and the McKinsey team had a wonderful presentation. Talking about the opportunity, talking about, we need to go get it and things like that. But to your point, how are you going to get around a group of operators that operate very differently, very independently to really collaborate. And that to me is the fundamental change from a typical telco model. Because if you look at telco, everyone is sort of operating in their own countries, a region, or multiple countries. They operate within some sort of regulatory effect, and they have, in the past, what I call vendors and suppliers. Some of the equipment manufacturers they would design the network with and roll out. Today, in this model, it becomes very much of an ecosystem play, which from an operating model, culture, talent perspective is fundamentally different for any telecom operator out there. And that's why you're seeing so much time in going through this process just to align on a certification process with Chimera. How many APIs are we going to prioritize? Alex shared 50, right? And of these APIs, how are operators going to actually build out? Even for ourselves, we try to be on the leading edge of this space. And I think we have a handful only, nowhere close to 50. And remember, we operate across 16 different countries. And to do that, 50 APIs across 16 countries, and yet the notion on the collaboration with not just within the operators, but also on the commercialization and monetization side is not clear. Because you could, and I'll use the exact same examples over the weekend, you could have a potential customer like Boeing, right, industrial company global. That may be different than a Citibank, which is a financial services. That's a global entity, but really operating locally. Or you could have almost like an SME type in each country. The APIs and the needs are very different. The monetization is very different. Now, the challenge is, in the past, we talked about the different Gs in the monetization model. The telcos have given almost like a all-you-can-eat model from a data perspective. And that's why a lot of the CapEx hasn't been recouped. Now, on the API model, and I think this was the point raised in the room, how are we going to go from, let's call it a cost-plus model, just to make the margin, versus a value-based pricing model, and who's willing to pay?
So I think, and it's interesting, I think this conversation comes up a lot, right? And one of the things that I think is hopefully changing, and the reason why something like Open Gateway and Open APIs make sense is then we don't know the answer. It's going to be different in every market. And so it's really about reaching out to the developers, where then someone like you guys, right, Ivan, where you have developer relationships, or AWS through Telecom Marketplace, where you have those relationships. I mean, is that a right way to look at it?
Yeah, it could be the right way. I just want to build, this was really great answer. And on the Open APIs, I want to say the complexity for the business is even bigger because of local rules or regulations. So let's take something like geolocation API. If you're passing by Tesco or by Walmart, I can send you a message at that point with a discount to enter. Well, guess what? In some countries, I'm allowed to do it from a data privacy perspective, and in some others, I'm not. So even the use cases, and that kind of, I think I want to kind of come to that answer on developers. It'll be our task to somehow pre-package use cases and manage education. Where can you do what? Because if, there will be, innovation will be very slow if you let free diffusion and everybody figure out what they can do. It'll be much faster if we have packaged, okay, here's your marketing use case. It's allowed in this countries. This is how it works. I think that'll drive adoption faster. And I think it's our task to work with developers and businesses to help to define like top priorities, which could then affect your development roadmap.
By the way, sorry to intervene. On that particular point, there are some technology providers out there who shall remain nameless, who's trying to make that play, right? Having a platform, linking all the quote-unquote approved open APIs, validating it, seeing the regulatory, what's available, what not, and providing that space for the developers. So I think that's a pretty interesting space.
Yeah, many of us are trying, but I think the use case will be.
Please, Ani.
I was just thinking about what Ivan had said, and it really struck a chord in me. And you had asked all of us about what we thought of your the trend and predictions, right? A Niels Bohr comment came to mind. He said, predictions are extremely difficult, especially when they're about the future. Now, the 10 or 11 trends that you had, if you add those to what he just said about the power, the combinatorial power of some of those trends, in your next report, if you were to say, look, these are the 10 trends that we see today, but if you pick, for instance, Open RAN and cloud adoption and open APIs, we predict that the combination of these three trends will transform networks in XYZ way 2 years from now. That would be a very interesting read, and I'm sure these folks would pay money for those GSM reports. I'll just take 10% of the take.
Someone has to. I have a dog who needs. I have a dog who needs food, so hopefully.
I would just say that when we look at APIs, our customers talk to us in 3 distinct areas within APIs. The first is the problems they're trying to solve. There, they want the biggest and broadest capability in terms of solutions available. There, what we have is the AWS marketplace that allows for a frictionless experience for customers to consume those applications, and that's how AWS from the Genesis has been built. The second is the ability to take the APIs from the network, catalog them, and expose them. And that's, no secret, that's been standardized through 3GPP with the exposure function. And then there has to be a native integration into the cloud from services like Wavelength and others that allow for the same APIs to be available in the cloud, at the edge, and at the very far edge. And those are, for us, the 2 fundamental blocks. And the third one is a deeper integration into the networks together with the partnerships we have globally with the operators that allow for this entire supply chain to work seamlessly for our customers, right? So the industrial customer you were mentioning, when I look at it in the conversations we have had with our enterprise industrial customers, our public sector customers, that's how they want the experience to be. And that's, in my opinion, how this is progressing.
No, I think it's I was having a conversation with some analysts before saying, is it a race to the bottom? How is this all going to work out? And I think what we're going to see is, particularly with APIs, there'll be the developer community you guys have worked with, and maybe some folks will want to work with the open API, open gateway, some won't. There'll be the developer community you have. There'll be the Nokia developer, and everyone will target different communities and bring it in. I see we have 5 minutes. I want to end with one question, a quick one for everyone, which is next year. We're here next year, and you opened this door, Ani, by saying, in 2 years, this is going to be the most, what we should say is what we think, going next year, the impacts. What do you think next year we should be talking about? I mean, what do you think will be the most important when we're here in 2025? And hopefully you're all back here and we can do this again. What do you think will be the most important trend for next year?
What might be of interest, I think, to the broader community, including your client base, which is our client base, the service providers, is how business models need to change. I think technology we will solve. There'll be open APIs, there'll be non-terrestrial networks, there'll be capabilities on 5G, 6G, whatever. That's an iterative process. I think some of the things that haven't stuck, like private networks, and we keep pushing out the hockey stick and everybody's cautiously optimistic and it never seems to happen. I don't think it's a matter of technology. It is a matter of the status quo around how service providers and telecom infrastructure vendors and the ecosystem and community at large is stuck in a pricing, commercial, and business model which is 10, 15 years old. I hope to have a conversation next year on private networks succeeded because operators eventually figured out how to actually sell to enterprises. Okay. Non-terrestrial networks will matter because it's not so much about a cool satellite-based network, but this is how those networks will be fundamentally consumed. The business model for me would be very interesting to see next year.
Business models. Ivan.
Okay, I don't want to repeat what he said, although I love it. So I think automation at scale. So, we had AI for a number of years, but actually we didn't see any impact or very little on GDP. So productivity increased. Mainly GDP was driven by expansion in fiscal policies. I hope next year we'll actually come closer, at least in a country or in a focus group, talking at real automation at scale. And the full ecosystem that could include IoT, everything. But that's kind of in a brief.
Great one. Harrison.
I think the metaverse and Bitcoin will come back on force.
I hope so.
I'm kidding.
And I'm
because that was 2 years ago, right?
So how much have you invested in NVIDIA? I'm just thinking.
No, but I think joking aside, I do think, I think you have mentioned it. What are the technologies that is a if or when, and what is it going to happen kind of thing, right? So to me, I would go back to Gen AI. I do believe Gen AI will fundamentally change society, business model, companies, and everything. And again, I'll bring it back to the Jensen Huang example from just last week, 2 weeks ago. He mentioned 5 years ago, everyone was teaching or advising their kids to be computer scientists and computer science majors because software will eat the world. Nowadays, with the advent of Gen AI, everyone's saying Gen AI is not important because computer science is not important. because you can actually really democratize the skill sets that's needed, right? But I'll actually tweak it a little bit more. I think it would also amplify who's a good developer and who's not a good developer because of those capabilities, right? Not really the coding process, but actually the downstream effect. And I think the second thing is, I think the skill set are still important, may still be found in the engineering and the computer science courses, but it's actually more about creativity and thinking about these solutions to be solved. It is thinking about sort of critical thinking and logical thinking that can help break down the process that is needed to utilize Gen AI to solve these problems. And there's another thing I heard the other day, which is don't be afraid that Gen AI will take your job. Be afraid that Gen AI, that somebody else beside you will use Gen AI better than you, that will take your job.
No, I think as someone who got a liberal arts degree, I'm happy to hear about critical thinking. And I mean, so Gen AI, automation at scale, business model transformation. It feels like they've summed up the AWS booth. I feel like they're helping. I mean, so obviously those are all things you're focused on. But what else do you think will be a big deal next year?
For me, next year, I think we'll be talking about not generative AI, but specific experiences in fixed wireless, within eSIM, within all of these space that generative AI has created. Let me give you an example, right? When you look at an experience that we are conceiving together with some of our partners in the operator domain, going into the operator home application. Today, all you do in these home applications is manage Wi-Fi or the most basic things. But imagine a time when you can go in and say, what are the devices in my home? And have the ability to manage those devices from that operator application. That mode of engagement into the operator's experience, whether it is fixed wireless or it's a fixed network, will transform the way the customers engage with our operators. That's what we believe will change the conversation from cost per bit to value per bit. And that's what we believe would be the next year's big theme, hopefully.
I'll say I think the best panels, I said before, are discussions, but also one where I come away learning something, because as a moderator, you don't, and I learned a whole lot. So thank you all very, very much. This was great. Thank you to everyone. The report is available. There is a QR code, and you can always go to our site, gsmaintelligence.com. Appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you, everyone.